So I'd like to, for a bit of a chat, I invite Rachel Elnaugh back to you and this evening. Okay. Set up. We weren't sure whether we were going to sit on the stage or sit at this, so we were given both options. It just seemed the easiest thing to do. Really, the idea of this is so that I hopefully can represent some of the questions that are going through your minds and ask some of the things that may not have been immediately answered in your presentation, not because it was lacking in anything, only just because you're short of time. And I think the first thing which I mentioned earlier on today, which I find extraordinary, you have 5 boys.
Yes.
I've got 4 children, and I know that's a handful. 5 boys would scare me silly, and yet you've still got the business. And how does that work?
Well, actually, I think it's easier to have children if you run your own business. I mean, when I was in the corporate world, it was much more structured and 9 till 5 and challenging. Whereas when you run your own business now, I run a virtual business from home. I have great support. I have nannies. So I can be wherever I need to be, and I just think it's a great lifestyle. I think for kids to grow up around parents who've got a business and they're kind of helping out and getting involved, I think it's great. It's great.
How old's the oldest?
15, and the youngest is 4.
4.
Yeah.
Do you get the 15-year-old involved in the business?
But I just always remember with Red Letter Days, we launched the hot air balloon at a balloon festival, and I remember him coming, when he was about 4. So it's really nice moments like that, and we've been up in helicopters and stuff like that. So he's experienced a lot, and he's great at business. And in fact, savers, and he'd been packaging them up and selling them for 50p, and he actually got put in detention. And actually that week I was doing a talk at an education conference for teachers about how to create an enterprise.
Present the business plan to his teachers.
Well, I just kind of despair of education a bit, because I think if we're going to create an enterprise culture, it has to start with kids. And I think it's one great thing about Dragon's Den, although I've mixed views on Dragon's Den. Actually, it's got a massive following of kids and teenagers who it's really inspired them to think it's not just all about university and getting a job, because that isn't the future.
Absolutely. Have you been out and talked to schools at all?
Yeah, I've done lots of schools, lots of universities, and it's just great. We've got great talent and energy, and they're so. I mean, I'm an analog entrepreneur in a digital age, but these kids. I mean, my 4-year-old's on the iPhone doing this and that, and they're all just.
But you do Twitter, don't you?
I tweet, yeah.
Twitter.
Yes.
Oh, it just shows you. Excuse me, 57 and struggling here. I'd just like to tell you, me, not you. Hey, but you brought Dragon's Den up as you started it, and I'm going to blame it on you. That the fact that it is so staged, I must admit I'm not a fan. Could you just have a quick hand showing? Fans of Dragon's Den, demonstrate it now. Oh, there we are. So it's about 50%, maybe a bit more actually, but I just want to make it even. I'm not a huge fan because I think it's more theatre than anything else, and something you said earlier in your presentation really captured it for me, which is, of course, we're quite careful who we choose in the auditions. And for my money, auditions are for shows and interviews are for business. So, really, is it just a show?
Yeah, I mean, it's an entertainment show, but it's been hugely successful for the BBC. I mean, we created the concept started in Japan and was bought by the BBC. It was owned by Sony, and they did a joint venture, and BBC recreated it for a Western audience. And on the basis of that original series, it's been syndicated worldwide. So the license has been sold. So lots of Dragon's Den versions, like in New Zealand and Australia and Canada, and then ours has been sold worldwide. So in terms of a product, as a business, and a product that they created, it's hugely successful. But I think the problem comes when you think that the BBC has a responsibility to educate and to teach business in a positive way. And I do think The Apprentice and Dragon's Den are quite old paradigm, conflict and confrontation, whereas the real business world is much more feminine, it's much more collaborative and supportive. And certainly when we filmed that original series, filmed 100 hours, which was cut down to 5, and all the really supportive, nice, interesting conversations were all cut in favour of the irritable comment that you just sort of come out with. And the directors just go, kind of, thank you very much. And they would deliberately provoke, I mean, the producers deliberately provoke it, like keeping you and say, well, just send one more person in, and they send someone in who's hopeless. Because they know that you want to get off, you know, because they're overrunning, and it's like 100 degrees in the studio, and we shot it in the summer. So you're in that space of, what do you mean, you know, and that's the bit that they cut. So it's
do they give you any coaching in terms of pausing coaching? Do you know that let's just string it out as long as we can, and those wonderful looks. I was having a look back at some of your early Series 1, Series 2, and there are those wistful looks with the pen in hand. And I feel like they've been staged.
Well, the thing, you have to understand that the way they edit it, and we discovered this when you've watched the first series, you thought, I didn't make that face then. Yeah. Because you've got 5 cameras on you at all times for the 100 hours. If you make a grimace, they will keep that shot and they'll edit it in somewhere else. And you know, so I kind of learned a lot about TV, and I watch TV now with a bit of a cynical eye, because it is all in the edit, and you know, they present it the way they want it to be presented.
Understandably so. Have you got any real car wrecks that some really juicy car wrecks that you can share with us, where people have just got up? I mean, you've just wanted to run screaming from the building, or that people who have just made a complete mess of it, and why?
Well, it's a double-edged sword, isn't it? Because the ones that make the complete mess of it have got more chance of being edited in. And so with Series 2, you actually found that people were deliberately crying or getting into emotion because they knew that there's more chance that you're going to get edited in, as opposed to just be one of those sound bites. So it all became quite manipulated. So.
Well, I think we've established that. And how many people did you end up investing in? Did you invest in anybody? That's the sort of thing I know you put the promise on the table, but did it really happen? What happens once you...
Yeah, and that's the interesting thing, because obviously they do the pitch and everyone gets at least an hour, and if the people who've got the investment, typically it goes on for 2 to 3 hours actually, because you're really trying to delve if you're interested. And so you have what's on the show, and then you make the offer, but then afterwards, when you get to do the due diligence, and then you get to meet them, and you start delving into the business, you start to discover all this stuff coming up. So in the first series, I offered, on the show, I offered to back 4 of them, and 2 of those materialised, and 2 of those didn't. But, so, you know, the hit, I think the hit rate is probably 50-50 from offer to completion. You know, because there's so many things that come out of the woodwork, you know, as in any due diligence.
I sort of rather expect they're going to do another show which is after the money, or
they do these follow-up shows, don't they?
They do, but they just there needs to be more made of that in a way. Are you still involved in either of those 2 businesses that you put on?
Not really, no, to be honest. I mean, the thing is, I would not do angel investment. It is actually quite thankless, and they do say it's the most difficult form of investment to get, because it's high risk money, it's a huge amount of time that you have to input. You know, that's why there is that gap in fundraising. Most VCs aren't interested in anything much less than 5 million investments, and that's the reason, because it takes as much effort to get involved in a £5 million business than a £50,000 investment, you know. It did drain a lot of my time trying to help groom these businesses.
But you've done it, you've taken that and moved it into coaching, which is something you've done for the last 6 years.
Yeah.
Coaching or mentoring, which word do you like best?
Well, I mean, what happened, it's interesting, because Red Letter Days crashed, which we may talk about later.
Well, we might get to that, yes, but I just thought we'd start with some of the easiest stuff.
And so in the wake of that, I suddenly got invited to speak at all these events, and to be quite honest, I needed the money, and I was being offered like £5,000 a time, so, and I was terrified of public speaking. I thought, I'm going to have to face my fear here, because, you know, it's sort of financial drivers. But every time I spoke at an event, people, and I just talked about my story, people would say afterwards, oh, would you help me? Would you be my mentor? You know, would you come and help with my business? And I just actually created a whole range of products in response to demand, and actually created a whole business around mentoring for 6 years, for the past 6 years, and it actually has been quite fascinating helping other people on their journey with mixed success. I mean, you know, I wouldn't say I had a 100% hit rate, but the businesses, with my stars, my big star business is a company called Wooltastic, which when the guy came to me, he was turning over 70,000. It's children's bedroom wall murals. And he was kind of making ends meet at doing car boot sales on a Sunday, and it was just a dreadful product. And he said, like, I really want you to come on board, I've seen you on the telly. So I went along to see him, and I said, so what's your vision for the business? And he said, oh, I want to create a multi-million-pound international market-leading brand and sell it for millions. And I said, are you serious? And when I said, are you serious, I didn't mean kind of, are you serious? I meant, are you up for it? And he said yes, and that was in 2008. So I got involved. I'm now non-exec chairman, and this year he'll do 3 million. He's just got Toys R Us. He's exporting to 40 countries. We had to deconstruct and reconstruct the business, but it's great when you can have that kind of success, you know. And he's grown as a person, which is great as well. But he had the energy and the drive, and I think if you've got, for me, energy and that kind of mindset, if you've got those ingredients, it's just the most powerful thing, because with people like that you can do anything.
Fair enough. You said something earlier when you were presenting that good ideas are all over the place. It was something like that, I think.
Yeah.
And I sat there thinking, oh, I don't think so, Rachel. No, that's not quite. Because good ideas have their time, and if you don't hit that time slot, a really good idea is just not going to fly, potentially.
Yeah.
But and I just would want to question that really and say, well, where is it inspiration or just, you know, hard work? And where do those two meet?
Well, it's the old thing. I mean, I hope my mother-in-law is in the audience, but she's always kind of like, I had that idea 10 years ago. Oh, that thing, that's really. I had that idea. I'm like, well, why didn't you do anything about it? And you know, the world is full of people who had great ideas but never acted on them. Yeah. And so for me, you know, ideas really a ten a penny. But the magic is people who can unlock and take it from an idea and make it into a business and actually physically manifest it and make it happen and make it profitable. That's the tricky bit. That's 99% of it. The idea is only 1% of it.
Well, tell me about those. The people who can take that idea and turn it into a business. What are those? What are the qualifications? What are the attributes you're looking for? What are the common things that people do that screw it up?
Well, I think there's 3 key attributes: determination, persistence, and just sheer drive. And I think if you've got those 3 ingredients, then pretty much you can achieve anything. Because the thing about business is, when you start it, it starts out like this, and you've got a concept. But actually what happens in reality is it morphs and it shifts and it adapts into something else. So you need someone who can actually run with that and adapt and kind of, when the waves hit, ride them, as opposed to, and you get to the point of giving up, you lose hope. And it's the people who can push past that pit, they're the ones who triumph. And most entrepreneurs do hit the pit before they
I think this neatly brings us into Red Letter Day, really, which talking about hitting the pit, your expression, not mine. And but before we get to the thing that people talk about, which is when things went slightly pear-shaped, the thing that really interests me is the 16 years that you've spent building this brand, making it work. When we talk about finding money, everybody's trying to find a bit of money, but your comment earlier on today was people are often looking for money that they don't really need. That was fair, isn't it? And but at some point you must have been looking for money. I mean, you'd had a pretty good career before that, and accountancy and all that sort of stuff. So did you start off with a suitcase full of money? You know, was that the launch pad, or were you out with the pitching documents and trying to get investment? what happened right at the front end?
Well, I mean, yeah, I had about £25,000, which I'd saved up during my career in the city. And I did go to NatWest Bank. I originally went to Barclays, then NatWest, and I just remember this bank manager saying, I can't do it to you, Rachel. I can't lend you this money. Because I had a property and I was prepared to put it up as collateral. He said, I can't do it to you. And anyway, at the time, there was a business expansion scheme, Margaret Thatcher's schemes back in '89, where you got 100% tax relief on investments. It's much more powerful than EIS. I think we do need something like that back now. But basically, I just persuaded family and friends to pitch in a bit of money with that. But having said that, in that first 18 months, it was a disaster, and I pretty much, wasted the whole lot on brochure that didn't work, crap advertising, because I just didn't know what I was doing, and the money all ran out, and it was kind of like, it was so close to going under, and the way that I survived it was to ask for help, because I was still freelancing in fantasy.
Is this financial help, or this is
well, just someone helped me, because so I was freelancing at the time, and my boss, who was an accountant, I just said, Barry, I know this is a great idea, I just can't seem to make it work. What do you think? And he said, oh, I've got a great client. He's a marketing guy. He'll know what to do. So I went along to see this guy, and he was the key. That he said, basically said, this is crap, Rachel. You wasted your money. And I'm like, And anyway, he took me under his wing. I was only 24 at the time, 25. And he redesigned everything, and I just really learned through working from him the power of branding and marketing. And so many businesses, so many small businesses skimp on great communication and great collateral. And I just think that it's so important to have collateral which just speaks
Sorry,
on
when you
an
say
emotional
could
level.
you define collateral?
Well, anything that expresses your business, whether that's a website, whether that's a business card, brochures, leaflets, brand identities, And particularly now we're in this whole personal branding era, putting yourself at the heart of your brand is having these kind of bland corporate identities. People buy from people, and now with things like Twitter, so much business is done through the people. I would really say to you, if you've got a business and you personally are not in there through a blog and through your image and through your video content and through your passion for what you do, really say you're sub-optimized. So having that big corporate front doesn't work at all. But anyway, to get back to the story, Barry took me under his wing. He's just said, forget the big heavy brochure, let's just do a simple fold-out poster of experiences and put it into Sunday supplements. I persuaded my first husband to put up the money to pay for I think we just put 100,000 in or something, tiny amount. And literally the minute they hit, the phone started ringing and money was pouring in. And it's just amazing in business. You can be really struggling, and then one day you walk through a magic door. One day you hit that tipping point. It's such a delicate thing, but when you go through that doorway and everything starts to flow, it's like you're off. And the business just snowballed, and literally for a whole decade, it just snowballed, and we got to making £1 million profit on 10 million turnover by 2001, which is kind of the pinnacle of the business. Even though it went on to grow to 18 million, I'd say that was at its peak of perfection, and I should have probably kept it there. Because if you've got a business making £1 million profit a year, wow, all you have to do is just keep sustaining it. You've got a fabulous life. You really don't need to kind of go for gold and float it, and you don't need all that stuff. And I was a bit naive, and I thought, oh wow, we've got to 10 million, we're making £1 million, let's, when I was in the city, Anita Roddick and Debbie Moore were floating on the stock exchange, and ego takes over, and with entrepreneurs, I think, generally. So I think that was the start, the beginning of the end.
So really, just catchy, the first husband came to the age you had to get some money from somewhere, and that was easier than the bank at that moment, just to get it going.
Yeah.
I did pick up it wasn't that much. It was only 100 grand. Was it? And I did pick that.
No, I think it was about 30 grand.
Was it? Okay. That's cool.
100,000 leaflets. I think the campaign.
Oh, I thought it was 100. I beg your pardon.
No,
I thought there was 100 grand. I was good. That's not very much.
Like 15, 20 grand around that. Okay. That was just all it needed, just to,
To set it going.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, then I've got to ask. I think I read somewhere £3.3 million in the bank.
Yeah.
And Barclays popped in the door and said, that's it, you're done, shut your doors, something close to that. How does that work? It's all absolutely rinky-dink, you're making all this money. I just... What happened, Rachel?
Otherwise I'll get another letter from their legal department. But no, I mean what happened was, in 2002, we got to that point, 10 million turnover, £1 million profit, and we're thinking, right, let's grow the business, let's go to gold, let's float it. And we embarked on a big expansion plan, which kind of went a bit disastrously wrong, and a lot of problems hit us at the same time. We had accounting issues, we overspent, and sales didn't hit their targets. So we had a sort of triple whammy of financial woes. And we went from that £1 million profit into, we actually made a £4.7 million loss that year, which just was like massive. And a lot of people said to me, you're never going to recover from this, Rachel. You may as well just close it down. You haven't got any personal guarantees. But of course, I had so much emotional attachment to the business. I thought I have to save it. I have to, I used to feel like a child that's got terminal illness. You'll like go over the whole world to find doctors and whatever before you pull the plug. And anyway, so I was nursing it back and refinancing it and getting it back on board and getting the money flowing again and getting it back to where it was. And what happened was that Barclays Bank bonded our credit card takings, because obviously we were selling vouchers which got taken up some months later. So you might buy a hot air balloon voucher, but it might not be redeemed till the summer. So they had a contingent liability. And so what they were basically saying is, all the money you take on credit card, which was virtually 90% of our takings, we're going to keep the money until the person's done the thing. So we're going to keep it in this bonded account. Now, of course, bear in mind, to sell something, you've got to do the marketing, you've got to actually physically, you've got to package it, dispatch it, you've got to pay the VAT, you've got all those overhead expenses, and so you've got all that to pay for until the person goes. And even then, not everyone redeems. Not everyone takes up a voucher, and there was like a non-redemption rate of something like 22%.
Wow.
So quite high. So we were saying, yes, we know we need to be bonded, but we don't need to be bonded for, it was actually about 4.5 million, the bond, of which 3 million was cash. And we were saying, yeah, we know we need to be bonded, but it's not for 4.5 million. And they were like, no, they're very risk averse. And of course, in business, whoever controls the cash has the power. And you might want to go down whatever legal route. They may be totally wrong, it may be totally illegal, but if you've got the cash, whoever's got the cash has got the power. So we were powerless. And we got to the point, we had 3.3 million cash at bank, 3 million in the bond, and 300,000. And we were just being starved of all cash flow funding. A refinancing deal had fell through at the last minute. And Barclays just wouldn't relent. And we just got to the point where we were forced into administration. Because suppliers are their own worst enemy, and one of our suppliers had placed a winding up order. And when you have to have a winding up order, I mean, literally, we had bailiffs with vans turning up. The staff had barricaded themselves in, and the lawyers said the only thing you can do is trump that by putting it into administration. And the really frustrating thing is that bond, when it was unwound, so 12 months later, after all those vouchers, and bear in mind it's all over the newspaper, so everyone who was going to redeem would have redeemed, so like maximum redemption you can imagine. The cost of fulfilling it was just over £1 million.
Yep.
All those vouchers that they said we need 4.5 million, it was only just over £1 million. So that we were justified in asking for that 3 million back. But so basically the profit margin, which is the difference between the cost of sales and the selling price, which was in the bond, they gave that all to Peter and Theo, who bought the business. They bought the business for £250,000, so they essentially got the whole bond, 3 million, 2.5 million, and there was £500,000 remaining of money that, like, what do we do with this? And Barclays took it as their fee. And to be quite honest, what has happened to the banking sector is, to me, karma. Because I just think banks have, and the thing, having told that story many times, so many people have written to me with their own horror stories, particularly about Barclays, but other banks as well. And I just think there's been so much abuse of power within the banking system that what is happening, personally, if I'd been in charge, I would just let the whole thing crash. And had a national bank, that just one bank that is fair.
Risk-averse, greedy banks. It's hard to believe. Very hard to believe. So, just can I ask you just that one little question, which is, why did it happen? Did you just take the eye off the ball, as the cliche goes?
Well,
I mean, yes, the bank was contributing, obviously, but there was a.
I mean, there's two answers to that, because looking back, I guess there were things I would have done differently, you know, if you can, with hindsight, but then the other answer to it is I had lost my passion for the business. And it's really funny because back in 2002, a friend of mine was training to be a life coach, and she said, "Oh, Rachel, would you be my guinea pig client?" And I said, "Well, I don't need a life coach, but okay, I'll do it." So anyway, she had me do all this stuff, and one of the exercises is I had to write like a plan of my whole life till I was going to die, like all the things I wanted to do. And this is back in 2002, and about 6 months after the company crashed, I found this piece of paper. I was going through my papers. I'm like, oh my God, because I've written on there, like in 2006, it says, get rid of red letter days. I get emotional talking about this. Get rid of red letter days, spend more time at home with my children, be creative and write. And every word of that little cosmic order was delivered to me exactly as I had requested it. Get rid of, which is angry energy, just get rid of it. Spend more time at home with the children, because my business is based from home, and the book deal was one of the first things that came through, so a deal to write a book. So you have to be very careful what you wish for. So I'm a great believer in manifestation, and it can be used very positively, but also very negatively, and particularly if it's got anger energy behind it. And I told that story at one event, and a woman came up to me afterwards. She said, "Rachel, I have to tell you this." She said, "I had a car, I hated the car, I kept complaining about it. I'm like, I've got to get rid of that car, I've got to get rid of that car." And she was involved in a crash, and it was written off. Luckily, she survived, but she just realised that she brought that to her through her negative messaging. So this stuff is really, really powerful. I do a lot of research and work around energy and empowerment, and I really am a great believer is that what you put out is what you bring back.
Undoubtedly, but I hear a lot about vision from people. There's the coaches and the motivational guys, and you've got to have vision. And you obviously had a vision for Red Letter Days, that would be fair to say.
Yeah.
Because you used the expression this afternoon, you need to be able to translate your vision into finance. Is that right?
Well, it was understanding the language of finance and translating the words into numbers.
Into numbers. So,
yeah.
And the vision's really quite important. I've done some work with Colin Jackson of the Runner, the Hurdler, and he's talked about lying in the playground and looking at the sky and dreaming about breasting the tape in a race. And do you think that's real? Well, pardon me. I've also seen an awful lot of corporate vision statements which are frank, just nonsense.
Yeah.
And do you think that it is vision? I mean, how important is that vision, or is it really just business acumen, hard-based, blue-faced business acumen?
Well, for me, it's about a vision in terms of a visualization. So it's about actually almost daydreaming. I've always been a massive daydreamer. And what I tend to daydream about tends to show up. And there's a lot. I do a lot of feng shui as well. A lot about having positive vision around you. So the pictures you surround yourself with, the visual imagery, the vision boards you create. And there's a lot of incredible stories about how people create their images of how they want things to be, and then Steve Jobs channeled much of what he did at Apple because he was a Buddhist and he did all of that. You have access to the seek through your energy, and I think there's a lot that we don't know about that stuff that is starting to come into the mainstream now. and it's very.
What you think about, you've got to get this right. What you think of space.
But you attract stuff.
Sorry?
Di Martini, was it?
John Di Martini.
I think it was.
Yeah.
Yes.
Think about and think about you doing about.
I can't remember. When you steal a lot of things, it's hard to remember what that research is.
You attract stuff that matches your vibration, and this is the interesting thing, it's vibrational energy. So I might say, oh, I want to make money, but if I'm vibrating with debt, I'll attract more debt. So you have to really understand what your vibration is doing, because what people say and where their vibration is at is often quite different.
Well, the only vibration I know is opening that letter from the bank. But I think, does that ring true? Do you feel?
Yes. It will with the women.
We'll have some Q&A in a moment. Don't worry, they're just
They've got their arms folded.
We'll get it. Definitely doesn't ring true here. I was looking at some of your videos, so just to go off in a slightly different direction, but I was fascinated by just another speech you've made. And you were saying that, I've got to get this right, don't have a business partner, do it yourself. And I thought that was, I thought, ooh, that's a bit upfront really, because I always try and look for people to do things with in terms of business activities. Go on.
Well, I mean,
why not? Are you distrustful? Have you been bitten in the bum a couple of times? Is that
from my own experience, and also from dealing with a lot of businesses, that the minute problems start occurring, what happens is the energy turns onto one another. So there's more infighting and blaming than actually getting on with the business. And I'm sure everyone's been in that situation. And so I'm not totally averse to business partnerships, but I think you have to be really careful about who you bring into your business, and that they're an absolute complement, and it's a very professional relationship. Because it's a typical thing, again, with women, I have to say, a lot of women go to business in partnership because they're friends and they're having fun, and then they hit against reality, and one of them's working harder than the other, or one of them's putting more money than the other. And it's very easy for the whole thing to collapse into this kind of... and when that happens, and I've had it, the business that I'm creating, we started with 5 of us. And actually it ended up, we're spending more time in fighting about strategy and direction and this and that, and just than going forward. And so it's very difficult to make it work. Speaking, most great businesses are actually led by one leader, who's got a great team of subordinates to support them, but it tends to be one person at the helm saying, this is where we're going. So that's, I think it is easier, although it's more scary like that. It's more scary.
Can you make up with it with having some good mentors? Have you had mentors that you've used?
Yeah.
Because you've been mentoring other people, so
yeah.
Mentors must have mentors themselves, I presume.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if I look back at my Red Letter Days era, the big 2 turning points were absolutely through bringing a kind of older, wiser marketing person on board, because I didn't know much about marketing. My background was accountancy. And that was when the business step changed, and so I really do believe in expert help. But now I have lots of coaches for lots of things, you know, just you know, vocal coaching, presentation stuff. I've done a lot of energy work, just loads of different areas of my life. I'm really receptive to help and input, because if you are feeding others, you need to be fed. Your energy needs to be fed. You know, if you're out there. You know, you have to have a balance between output and input. So I'm a great believer in constant improvement, personal improvement.
So you've got another business on the whole,
yes.
Bubbling away, and you've got some business partners.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll come back to you with that statement of don't have business partners a little bit later. But what have you learned so far that you are implementing in that new activity?
In the new business?
Yeah.
Well, the new business is called Imago People TV, and it's basically a marketing portal for transformational coaches and light workers and change makers in the world. So it's a bit like a Red Letter Days. Red Letter Days was for experiences. We promoted experiences. We never actually owned any of the experiences. So this is a portal for people who are doing that transformational work. Because they're typically brilliant stars, they're brilliant at the work they do, but they're not very good at marketing. So, and I was mentoring so many of them. I thought they don't need mentoring, they just need a marketing portal. They need the platform. So I thought, well, why don't I create a TV channel, as you do? And so the TV channel is not about me, it's about assembling all of these amazing people. So we did our first 3 days filming last week, and it was incredible. But the interesting thing about the business, because it's about the new paradigm, we're trying to create it through new paradigm techniques. So we're trying to do it through manifestation and attracting, as opposed to push, which is a very masculine way of doing business, because that was my background, being very alpha female and just being aggressive to get what I wanted. Now what we're trying to do is really set intention and attract great stuff. And I have to say, last week we had 20 amazing stars who've shown up from that kind of world. So people like Barefoot Doctor, Sue Stone, who's an empowerment coach, Davina McHale, who's kind of contemporary shaman, and people like Brad Burton, who runs For Networking, who does a lot of empowerment work. So a very eclectic mix. And we've got them all together, and we did 3 days filming, and it was just, you could feel the magic happening in those 3 days. And we're launching it, actually, we're showcasing it at the business show at Earl's Court next week. So, you know, having put the energy, it's interesting, when you put the energy out there and you allow the momentum to go, and just, you allow the whole thing to flow. Because I'm a great believer in flow, that when you get into flow, you attract naturally great people, things, ideas, opportunities, and the whole thing starts to gather its own momentum.
But isn't this just that fundamental thing of I'm sorry, I'm just being very simplistic, but it's positive thinking, isn't it? Isn't it if you think you can or you think you can't, you're probably right? Isn't that the quote? I mean, doesn't that come down to really what it is?
Yeah, it's about having a positive mindset, but it's about being really clear about what you want to attract. And
what you want.
If you create that energy, and we did do a lot of energy work.
But I think
we did do a lot of energy work, but it's just so much fun to create something when it's effortless, because most people who come to me for mentoring, the business is a real struggle and nothing's working and it's like not joyful. But when you get into flow and when you get into your passion and you get into that momentum and make money's flowing, it's just wonderful. It's just when business gets to like that, when Red Letter Days was on its roll, it was every day was just joyful and deals were coming in, money was flowing in. It was just a great adventure, and I think that is for me the holy grail of business, when every day is an adventure and you just love it, and it's just doesn't ever feel like hard work, you know. But
part of the problem is that, I don't know, share this with some of the people in the room, that your book, The Business, yes, this is a plug, but it's a tasteful plug, and the title Business Nightmares is for me, I don't know, you might feel some of this out of the audience, that you read that and you think, yep, I know what business nightmares are. I've had one or two myself. And if that isn't going to shift it off the shelf, I don't know what is. And I think you're talking in terms of I use the word advisedly, holistic view of business, and it's the inner vision, but it's in a much more spiritual way almost. But this is a bit of the reality, which is life is made up of people who don't pay, people who...
Let me tell you, if you just, can I just say, this book is a book about hope, optimism, and keeping the faith through the darkness. And I had a massive argument with the publisher, and I said, I just don't think we should call it Business Nightmares, because it's a book about light and hope and optimism and keeping strong through adversity. And they just said, Rachel, in the UK, business books with negative titles sell 10 times more than the positive ones, so we're sticking with the title. So there you go. But actually, it is, and I have had, the interesting thing about this book is I have so many people who send me emails saying, I was lost, I was in despair, and I came across your book, or your book spoke to me from the shelf, and something made me pick it up, and it's changed my life. Emails, which is, I think that's quite magical, you know.
Absolutely.
You sort of feel that you've kind of made that difference, because it is about, life is about what how you cope with the dark, because that's the transformation, is that, without the breakdown, there can be no breakthrough, and that's what's happening in the world at the moment. We're going through a breakdown, which has to happen, and that's, imago means the cells in the caterpillar that vibrate to transform it into the butterfly, but the caterpillar thinks it's dying. When it goes through that process, and it's a big struggle for it to get out of the cocoon, but it transforms into something beautiful. So you've got to have the breakdown to get the breakthrough. So actually, adversity is sent to transform us into a better, to grow. So my journey has all been about transformation and growth. And actually, the more you grow, the bigger the challenges get. When you look at anyone's story, it's kind of their biggest growth comes through the biggest adversity. So when you look at life like that, it's kind of bring on the adversity, because it's my next chance to get to the next level.
Well, you certainly had the adversity. There's no question about that. And I think I'm correct in saying an awful lot of people who do make their million frequently lose it and then remake it.
Yeah.
And that's a standard pattern. And maybe that is exactly what you're alluding to, which is that it breaks down, you learn, you change, and you do it again.
Yin and yang. It's like Donald Trump's stories in there. I mean, he's made millions, but he was like $1 billion in debt back in the early 90s and almost wiped out. So the light and the shadow of the same money-making ability, the ability to create huge wealth, but also to create huge debts, are the kind of mirror of one another.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just the size of your energy around money, because not everyone gets it right, so.
Do you think we worry about money too much?
Well, I think there's a lot of tension around money, and that's the one thing that actually holds it away quite often. It holds the flow away if you've got a lot of tension around money. So
it's quite often accountants who cause that tension, no offence meant.
Yeah, but the thing about flow is a bit like me holding my breath because I don't trust that there's air. If I breathe the breath out, that there's going to be more breath to go. So when you hold on to money like that, it's a bit like holding your breath because you're too frightened to breathe. Whereas actually in business, you need to breathe in and breathe out, and you get the flow through attracting money, sending it out, attracting money. And I was at an event once, and there was this £10 note. Someone had bought a CD off someone, and then someone else said, "Oh, and let me give that to you for that thing I owe you." And the other person said, "Oh, can I buy a CD too with the money?" And then that person said, "Oh, could I just pay for that thing?" And it was funny. This £10 note literally went round this room of women who were all joyfully spending it with one another. There was only one £10 note involved. You notice it's just this one piece of paper, and that is how wealth is created. And that is what's happened with the economy, is it's slowed down because of fear. Whereas before, when everything was flowing, everything moves much faster. But it's the same £10 note, if you think about it.
Just going round.
Just how fast it flows. So it's like musical chairs. If everyone stops and sits on the chair and won't move, then the game can't play the game, So that's a challenge we have.
Well, it's a challenge we've all got, I think.
Yeah.
You've got a lot in the book. You've got a lot of the experiences. We're going to go into a break in a moment, and after which we're going to have a bit of Q&A, where you're most welcome to heckle and put up your opinion. And the last question I have is really just based around something which is NBSL, and pardon me for this, bit led, which is, they have up here leadership and management funding. This is on the basis of mentoring or coaching somebody in leadership, is that about right?
Yeah.
Aren't leaders leaders, and that's just the way they're made? Or do you think there's a leader inside everybody? Because you've just said that, pardon me, your point was it's got to be run from the front by somebody making it happen.
Well, someone with a vision and a passion, but that doesn't necessarily mean a kind of warrior person. I mean, I'm non-exec director on a social enterprise in London, which is all about rehabilitating kids who've got involved in drugs and knife crime, and they rehabilitate them through enterprise programs. And so these kids who've had just like complete crap lives, got involved in all this stuff, it's because their energy has not been focused into the positive. You give them a positive team-based enterprise project and the right mentoring and encouragement, and these guys are like shining, and the reoffending rate has gone, you know, it's like less than 10%, it's like 2 or 3%, you know, incredible results through channeling that energy into positive stuff. And I think anything that can channel energy positively is a great thing. Because at school I was really rebellious, and you know, because I had no focus for my energy. When you focus all of that energy into a positive purpose, you can achieve amazing stuff. And there's so many great stories of that. It's just that when people haven't got that vision and purpose in life, that's when they tend to just drift into the wrong
And is
things.
that focus and purpose that creates the leadership potential? Do you think? Is that fair
Well, it's
to say?
about having passion, because when people find their kind of soul purpose and what they're really passionate about, and they start living from that as opposed to chasing money, that is when you really get into alignment, and that's when you really get into that flow, because you're focusing then not on making money but creating great value because you love it so much, and then you naturally just attract all this great stuff. So I'm a great believer in that kind of working from the heart rather than the head.
May I say, Rachel, thank you.